So what we can do is maybe start with just talking about kind of broad overview of like just orienting around like the concept of the spirits, and then dial in on looking at each of the Hun and Po. And I mean, we can look at each of them a little bit, but like I said, Hun and Po will be what we'll land on primarily, I think. So, okay. So let's say, let's just start with doing this. So, all right. So the five spirits, of course, Hun and Po are here. And up here they just say Shen. Of course, Shen, is the terminology for just spirit. So this is kind of the generic word for spirit. If you just say spirit, normally that's going to be the word they're going to choose. And then E and J, right? So let's start with just looking at J, E, and Shen, because these are kind of a separate component, in my opinion, from Hun and Po, and these are kind of a bit different. So why don't we start with Shen? Because again, like I said, Shen is that's the word for spirit. When we're talking about spirits in general, Shen is going to be kind of maybe a good place to jump off from. So Shen, it's like, how do you do Shen? Like this?
Close.
Well, how do you, that? It's something like this, right? Here, do it. It's good to orient because with opinion, people obviously know what it is, but okay, perfect. So anyway, so Shen. So, my eraser. So right, Shen just means spirit. This is the word we're seeing most often. It's the word we're using most often because we always use it in the context of Shen, Qi, Jing, right? So we're looking at these as like the layers of the energetic layers in the body, right? And we're using this as a way to differentiate the aspects of lots of different things. In the context of medicine, often we're using these to differentiate the aspects of the organ. So when it comes to looking at the spirits of the organs, this is always how we're looking. We're looking at Jing as being the physical, right? And this is the most yin. We're looking at Qi as being the energetic, and we're looking at Shen as being the non-physical. Or there's a lot of different ways people will start to give attributions to this. One thing is people say this is the psychological. So this is like psyche. Other people are going to say this is like just mind. So I guess depending on how you're looking at words here, other people will say here you're looking at just spirit. So it depends on whether or not you want a secular connotation or more of a religious connotation. Normally spirit has some degree of religious connotation, right? And if you want to be completely secular, they'll just call this the mental level. So often you'll see this as the physical body. Here it's like the energetic body or the Qi body or the astral body. Often people will use in the New Age community, this is like your astral body with your Qi. And then up here, it'll be either the mental body, that's the New Age terminology, or the etheric body. So this is like the layers that we're looking at. So when we're talking about anything that's a spirit, we're always talking about that, just that level of what's the most yang aspect of the organ, right? So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at it as the most yang aspect of the organ. So when we're talking about the spirit of the heart, we're talking about the Shen. We know that Shen is related with primarily what? What do you guys think of with Shen? So like baseline, when you think of Shen in general as a clinical concept, like do you have like a one-to-one correlation?
Like heart blood, maybe.
So it moves in the blood. The blood is what houses it, right?
Sleep type issues.
Right, when it's not well.
Like presence in the eyes.
Yeah, so it manifests in the eyes. Okay.
Also in the tongue, you can see the amount of just vitality it has.
Right. Okay, what is it when someone has like presence of Shen versus their Shen is scattered or the Shen is absent? Normally, we're thinking of this just as baseline consciousness. So for me, Shen is like one-to-one baseline consciousness. it is going to be not your mind, it's going to be your consciousness. In other words, are you conscious? Are you present? Can you see out of your eyes? Are you here? Are you in the body? So we already mentioned that the Shen it's got this quality of being housed in the blood. And herein we find the reason that it's associated with the heart. Because the heart is, of course, a network which is including the physical organ of what we think of as the heart and also all of the arteries and veins. So that entire system is called the heart. The arteries and veins are, of course, continuous with the heart organ itself, and that whole system is going to have blood within it. So because the Shen is a very yang, So because the Shen has this really yang resonance, in order to be housed in the body, it's going to have some kind of a yin matrix which will seed it into the body. You can't house something that's got a strong yang resonance without having a strong yin matrix to hold it. Matrix, of course, coming from the Latin word for mother. So, in other words, something that's holding and containing that thing. So, the Shen has this yang resonance, the blood has this yin resonance. And these are connected, and this is why the Shen is related with the heart. So it lives in the heart, but it's really living in the blood. It's resonating in the blood. What else to say about Shen? You said it manifests in the eyes, right? So we always have these associations with like places where the spirits are going to be manifesting and everything. They say it manifests in the eyes. Is this one of these spirits that they say enters the body, right? Enters and exits the body. Because not all the spirits enter and exit from the body. So where's the Shen supposed to enter from? Crown of the head? Is that right? Yeah. I forget sometimes too. I think that, yeah.
The top of the mountain, it's shining down on the apex.
Yeah, and I think you'll see, I ask also because I think you'll see in different systems, in different systems they'll have different kind of ways that they describe how the spirits move and how they enter and exit. Normally, I think that they're talking about Shen as entering and exiting through the nose and mouth, which you'd think would be a long resonance, but not necessarily. So normally nose and mouth. So usually it manifests in the eyes, and it's supposed to enter and exit through the nose and mouth. And the Shen is what gives life to a thing, right? So the idea is the thing becomes animate. Anima is the Latin word for spirit, right? They have spiritus, but they also have anima. And anima is this idea of the thing has this movement, it has this motive action within it now. It's conscious and aware and it can move. So the spirit that kind of gives us life, that like makes us animate, that's the Shen. And you'll see with this business of the nose, this is why in the old days they would deface statues by breaking the nose off. Like if you had a deity and you conquered, so say you were an Akkadian and you conquered the Canaanites or someone or whomever it may have been, and you stole their god, and you took their god captive, they would break the nose off, which meant that the spirit could no longer enter into that statue and come to rest on that idol. So that's why you see all these ancient statues with the nose broken off. That's how you defaced it for the purpose of preventing the spirit coming to rest there. So it was kind of a symbolic thing. But yeah, so this is our idea of Shen. And you have this kind of clinical aspects of Shen. Normally they'll say you can have Shen disturbance, right? That literally just means usually you have the Shen it's not coming to rest in the blood. So the Shen it's restless. You have too much of this yang state of the Shen, which is naturally a very yang system. It's not rested in the blood. It's not anchored well enough. And so you're going to have this agitation quality. So that's normally all that amounts to. So you see that with patterns. Like what patterns normally do you guys think of seeing that with? So let's say Shen disturbance, because this is the only big pattern we'll see with Shen. So Shen disturbance, what patterns do you think that you'll see that arise out of?
Phlegm misting the heart.
Okay, and why phlegm misting the heart? Maybe we could have maybe we should have a different one for that. Well, okay, well let's say this. Let's start with these and then we'll extrapolate out from them. Okay, so from phlegm, let's say heart phlegm. Okay, what else? So if it's coming to rest in the blood, then naturally blood deficiency will cause this kind of pattern because you don't have enough blood to hold the Shen. And if the Shen is a yang, I'm struggling to, well, we'll just call it a spirit, I guess, because the Sheng is yang in nature. Having excess yang states in the heart will tend to polarize too far yang. It's going to mean that you have a depletion of the yin qi in the heart, and that's going to cause manifestations of this kind of Shen disturbance as well. So that would be things like heart heat and heart yin deficiency. So in these patterns, this is really where you're going to start to see Shen disturbance arise. Now, the phlegm is kind of separate from these because with these three, we're saying in all cases, we have either an excess of yang or a deficiency of yin within the system, which is going to cause that Shen to be agitated. In this case with the phlegm, this is different though. So the phlegm is actually, this means that we're going to have not necessarily a disturbance, and the terminology may be problematic, but the phlegm is really availing, right? So the phlegm means that you don't have clarity with the interface. So the Shen being maybe this kind of concept of your consciousness, and then you have the physical body. If there's phlegm misting the mind or phlegm misting the heart, then you're not going to have a clear interface, which means that the mind can't clearly manifest through the physical body. So it can't clearly resonate, or it can't clearly maybe receive the data through the sensory organs, and it can't clearly express out through the sensory organs. So this means you're going to have a disconnect there. So this phlegm misting business, what pattern, like let's say like Western patterns, what does phlegm misting normally look like?
Some kind of mental illness.
Okay, so
Psychosis.
Yeah.
okay, mental illness / psychosis, kind of the same thing. But this is a catch-net term overall. So we can see it show up as dementia, as in the case of something like Alzheimer's or any kind of dementia. We can see it show up with memory issues. We can see it show up with deranged behavior of different kinds too. People being out of touch in all sorts of different ways. But essentially what you're looking for when you have this phlegm business is you're looking for a lack of clarity of being able to connect to the person or what you would consider the person. So they're out of touch to some degree, and sometimes they're really out of touch. So that's what we're looking for. Alzheimer's and things like this. And for a long time, actually, I don't know if this is still the case, but even with Alzheimer's, they were actually, in Western medicine, attributing the cause primary to phlegm, to amyloid plaque. So they said it was plaque in the brain. So that's phlegm pretty much. It's like So I think that's not really so mainline anymore, or they're moving away from that a little bit. But for a long time, that was always what I was taught. So anyway, Shen is pretty straightforward. When the Shen is disconnected from the body altogether, you lose consciousness. If the Shen is partially disconnected from the body, you become semi-conscious. Any flagging state of consciousness is going to be related with the Shen. So if someone they're half awake, they can't keep themselves awake, drug-induced states, anesthesia is working by disconnecting the Shen from the physical body. You choke somebody out, the blood can't get to the brain, suddenly the Shen's going to depart. So these kind of things are all like Shen issues. So just think, normally with Shen, just think kind of it's your conscious state. It's not got anything to do really with the ability for you to think, except that you are able to think at all. That's how I look at Shen. Anything else to add about that? Yeah.
What is the big Shen versus just Shen?
Oh, this is Jeffrey terminology.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have a good description for it. I mean, I think that he talks about it as higher self. Like if you use New Age terminology, I think he's talking about big Shen as higher self. But I've also heard people relate the Hun to the higher self. Do you guys have any inkling? Anybody that's like deep in the Jeffrey lore?
He said that it is housed in the brain, and I never got an answer.
That's the Hun. That's the Hun. So.
But that's the liver.
The Hun's house. The Hun it's the liver spirit, but it stays in the brain pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean,
I also always thought
mostly.
Shen is like the collective consciousness.
I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, that sounds very right. I didn't mean to
It
cut you
comes
off.
into the individual to awaken the individual.
Yeah.
But
Or maybe it's a concept of a kind of a God kind of concept. Maybe it's the sun. I don't know. Yeah, I'm
I mean,
not sure.
You find that in like so many different mystical traditions, right? That there's like the one, and then there's the manifest expressions of the one that are
Yeah.
still essentially the one.
Yeah,
So like little Shen, big Shen,
The little
all
ones.
things.
yeah.
The baby.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, so that's
Totally different.
that's Shen stuff, though. I mean, there's all the other things we can get into, of course, with like acupuncture and herbs, but I think probably that would get a little bit wild if we tried to get into all that stuff today. But if you have any specific things as we go through this that you're interested in talking about, let me know. Okay. Uh-huh.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I recently heard that there's like blood and then there's blood.
What do you mean?
The literal blood
Mhm.
and then the concept of blood, sort of like Big Shen, Little Shen. Like
Mhm.
they're not the same thing in Chinese medicine. When they talk about blood, it doesn't mean the stuff that pours out of your veins. It's like a concept of everything that nurtures the body as a system. I just wondered about that.
Yeah, well, I think you could say maybe you have like the physical substance of the blood and then you have the functional blood. Maybe something like that would be how I would look at it. In that, if we say, oh, you're blood deficient, it doesn't mean the volume of the blood's necessarily deficient. It could mean that the quality of the blood's deficient or the blood's functional capacity is somehow lacking. That's how I would look at it. But if you're making like a philosophical point, it's like that's like Platonism. You have like the true thing, and then you have the shadow of the thing that exists in the manifest world. So it's like maybe there's like this higher self that has the true blood, somewhere.
You're saying it could be the function of the thing. Could that be like the function of the fluid that's moving itself or the receiving end? Like the whole system is considered?
Say it again.
So when you're saying it could be the problem with maybe not the volume, but maybe the function, like what
Yeah.
the blood's actually doing, could that also be like on the receiving end? Like say blood's going somewhere to
Mhm.
nourish something, but there's no communication between
Sure.
the Shen in the blood and the Po in the body, so then that's also considered the blood, problem with the blood. So.
Maybe. I mean, I would say that often with patterns in Chinese medicine, they're looking at the functional capacity for a system to execute a certain number of tasks. So it's like if the blood is supposed to carry oxygen and do an exchange in the lungs, and you have some issue with the membrane in the lungs where the interface isn't happening, maybe still they would say, okay, the blood's maybe... I think that often what you're looking at, though, is you're looking at a collection of symptoms, and you're looking at a collection of signs, and you want to see, okay, do all my signs point toward one thing, or am I having, there's a big blood deficiency sign, like the person's, they're fatigued all the time, which is kind of a blood deficiency thing. And, you think, okay, maybe they look kind of pale and they're fatigued, and you're like, okay, it seems like the blood might be deficient. But if there's no other blood deficiency signs, and you have a whole bunch of lung yin deficiency signs, then probably it's related with the lungs not being able to give that gas exchange. So the diagnostics are the most important part of this. Diagnostics are huge with Chinese medicine. That's the hard part with Chinese medicine. The treatment's easy because we have so many treatment options. But yeah, I would say that for most purposes, I mean almost all case purposes, it's like the actual blood is going to be related to the concept of the blood. Yeah.
Are you thinking of the yang level, like the nutritive level, which they sometimes call the blood level, but it's actually not the blood level?
I'm just reading the book Jeffrey recommended, written by the doctor and the female doctor, and she says there's the blood and then there's the blood, and they're not the same. So that's all. I'm like, I want to know what the blood really is.
And then there's menstrual blood.
And then
different.
what the? What's the blood? Lady Tan's circle.
Oh,
of
yeah.
Yeah.
Really
But I think that was taken from the writings of a female clinician. That part, because they're taking from that and making it historical fiction. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's
I've
good.
asked
I think
teachers at school too, and they didn't have a clear answer.
I think that may be something that may be a concept that she's just kind of, she personally kind of works with, because that's not really, I don't think that's too mainstream to think that you have like the conceptual blood and the real blood.
Gotcha. Okay.
But in Chinese medicine in general, that's often the language that's used, though. You have like a functional organ system, and then you have the
Right.
organ itself, right?
Exactly.
So that's normally how I think
Yeah.
about that
And
stuff.
we've kind of been explaining those things, like the
Yeah.
liver is not the liver.
Yeah.
It's the liver.
Yeah, it's
So
everything.
I'm like,
And the
and that I get, but no one ever explained that about blood yet. So
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah. Okay, so that's Shen. Let's look at, so Shen is by the way, let's take a moment to categorize. So Shen, Hun, and Po are these three spirits enter and exit the body. They enter at birth, or they enter at sometime during gestation, perhaps, depends on who you ask, and they exit when you die or shortly after. And then Zhi and Yi are spirits which emerge out of the body. They grow out of your organ systems. So these are not spirits in the sense that they're entering and exiting the body. They are spirits that are resonant properties of the organ systems. And so this is why these are kind of a division for me. And this is kind of considered this is like this Trinity concept with this. And then these are kind of a separate thing. So let's look at Zhi and Yi. So let's look at E next. So we talked about Shen. So the E is, this is normally translated. How do you guys think about this? Or do you know how kind of they translate it normally? Yeah, they normally translate it as mind or intellect. So this is distinct from the concept of consciousness. I can't talk and write at the same time. Is it intellect or intellect? Like this? Yeah, I think so. So this is distinct from the concept of your consciousness, because this is going to be, what can your consciousness do? So what is it doing with the information that it's provided when it's interpreting things from the senses, and then what's it putting back out? That is the E, mostly. So the E is going to be largely related, huge resonance with the digestive system. So the state of the digestive system is going to have a huge impact on the way the E is functioning. And for me, this is going to be manifest primarily in things like your capacity for things like logic, clear thinking, how ordered is the mind, things like, can you put together a thought, put together a sentence, hold everything together, and then produce it clearly? Yeah, this is often, so in Jeffrey lectures, he's always talking about, when he talks about the E, he'll say things like, if you have acute dampness in the spleen system, then the E suffers. So this is often, he'll always give the example of cheesecake for whatever reason, but he'll say, if you eat a lot, you can't really, you can't do math at that point for most people. Like if you have a huge, really phlegmy meal, you're not going to be able to think all that clearly, So, yeah.
Is focus part of this?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, focus. That's another one you can put on here. Yeah. So how sharp is the mind, that sort of thing. So it's the qualities of the mind, right? So this is the yang, the most yang aspect of the spleen system. It's going to have, in my opinion, a strong resonance with specifically small intestine. So digestive system, but small intestine is a big player here. So the qualities of the small intestine, in my opinion, have a huge effect on the way your E is functioning. But this is essentially your mind, right? So again, this is not a spirit which enters into the body. This is, as you're growing and developing, you look at a child, a baby, they don't really have much of an E at all. They're just, wide-eyed and kind of oblivious. So that's what you would expect to see with an adult that has an underdeveloped or completely undeveloped E. That would look like that. And when you have issues with this spirit, that's what you're looking for, is someone able to think. And when they're like, I can't think clearly. And in that way, this also may to some degree play in with some of the mental illness things we were talking about, right? So E is pretty simple. That's all I have to say about that. There's not much to it. And it's pretty straightforward when you're thinking about treatment. A lot of the issues we would say with the E are going to be issues that are covered when you're treating things like dampness or spleen deficiency, spleen yang deficiency and things like this, leading to dampness and phlegm. Then you start to have issues where the person can't really think too clearly, or they're more confused, or they're really lethargic and their mind is really lethargic and heavy. These are, these are clinically issues with the E.
What about like the stuff earth, like the thinking being like the cyclical thinking, pensiveness?
Yeah, so they normally attribute that to liver issues, right? Like, or at least I think of it like that. Do you guys think of it like that normally or no?
At DT, they tell us that it's.
I guess I'm thinking about the emotions, you know what I mean, and like the pensiveness, brooding,
ruminating,
ruminating,
chewing
the
over
worrying.
something.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking
Not
about.
being able to digest.
Normally, I think almost always what you'll find clinically is that is the liver impacting the spleen. So like liver overacting. So what you'll normally see is that's like, in Greek medicine, they would call that hypochondrial disorder, right? So that's like the classic symptom of a hypochondriac, right? Is someone that's got wheels turning constantly. And of course the hypochondrial region is this area here, right? Hypo meaning below and chondrus meaning ribs. So when you have all of this energy that gets clumped up here and stuck, and it won't disperse properly. That's what happens functionally when the liver becomes stagnant, because the liver as an organ system moves the qi out to the surface and to the extremities. So when the liver qi is stagnant and congested, then it's going to clump in the middle, and then you tend to get the spleen is impacted from that. The stomach also sometimes. So often people, when they get acute liver qi stagnation, they're nauseated or they don't have an appetite at all. And if the spleen gets impacted, often what you'll get is you'll get those thoughts that just turn and turn and turn. Because there's all this kind of usually heat aggravating the spleen, and it's causing the wheels, it's just causing hyperactivity. So that's how I think of that. I don't know of any clinical examples of when that comes up apart from that. I think that's the only case example I can think of for how that works. Yeah.
Can you relate this, the topic of E, with like ADD, ADHD? Would that be a spleen dysfunction?
Well, I don't know if, in all cases, I don't know if it's presenting kind of from the same pattern. I would say that if you're seeing hyperactivity, it's normally heat, especially if it's someone that's younger. Very rarely are you going to see a yin deficiency type of hyperactivity in a kid, for instance, or for someone that's like not, already pretty old. So I would say almost always hyperactivity means heat. If the person can't hold their focus, though, that's definitely going to mean, you could say that there's a balance. You could say, how strong is the capacity of the E as a system versus how much heat is it presented with? And you could say the E is your capacity for maintaining focus of mind, right? It's like, how much can you hold your mind? How strong is your mind? Okay. If you add heat to the mind, it's going to begin to disrupt the yin quality of the mind, right? With all things, we have a yin and a yang quality, right? And I think I mentioned this last time. The yang quality is an electric quality, which means that it's a motive quality. It causes things to move. It causes things to expand. It causes things to open. The yin quality is a magnetic quality. It draws in. I should do it in the inside here. The yin quality, it draws in, and it holds, it stabilizes, it maintains. The yin is a magnetic, kind of like gravitation, it's a magnetic quality. So always we have this yin and yang quality to things, right? So if you think about with the mind, for instance, even the E, which is kind of like, let's say, a yang, a relatively yang kind of, item in the body, the quality of the mind to be able to maintain focus and to hold itself and to be present and everything and dialed in, that's kind of a yin quality. So you add all these yang vectors to it, it's going to disrupt that yin qi, and it's going to cause it to be scattered or hyperactive or loose or mobile. It's going to open it up and expand it out. So you could always say the strength of the E relative to how much yang qi is being injected into that system will determine when someone's mind becomes scattered. So if your Shen becomes scattered, then it's like someone that's overdosing on drugs or something, or someone that's taken a bunch of some kind of drug that causes them to just be, they're not present. It's like, even if you do this, they're not there. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're awake, but not really. You wave and no one's looking at you. Mm-hmm. But with the E, if they're in that state of hyperactivity and scatteredness of the E, it means they're just going to be looking at everything constantly. They can't focus at all. It's going to be this. They can't focus. Mm-hmm. So they can't come to center.
That was a good question, because I think in the clinic we do, like people who can't make eye contact or neurodivergent or hyperactive, I think we do go to Shen sometimes.
Well, again, Shen is like a catch-net term, though. It just means that the spirits are disturbed, maybe. You could differentiate. Is it the heart spirit, or is it just Shen? Which Shen is it? Maybe you could say. Because all these
makes a lot of sense to me. Like
yeah.
You just said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Naturally. Very smart. Just kidding. No, I think that is a good question, though, to dial in on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, E's pretty straightforward. Let's look at Jir. So Jir is maybe, I think, just as simple, or maybe I could say that I know the least about the Jir. Maybe that's why I don't have much to say about it. But this is, of course, the spirit associated with the kidneys. Again, this is a spirit which is an emergent property of the kidney system. It doesn't enter into the body from somewhere and come from some other place and come in. It just grows out of the system. And again, you'll see that this is something which normally takes time to develop. Just like the E is going to take time to develop. If a child, as it grows, has a well-balanced environment, good nurturing, well-balanced diet is a big part, then the E is going to grow properly and they're going to have a good, healthy mind. With the Zhi, it's the same thing. If they have a nice nurturing environment and they're healthy and they're growing properly, you will see that the Zhi develops. And normally the Zhi is, they always call it the willpower, right? This is always what they say, is they say it's the will. But it's your capacity for exerting yourself in the world. So it's your capacity for holding space, for maintaining, kind of to just take space in the world, and then to have a sense of, kind of, in a lot of ways, this is like to have a sense of self in a very deep way, not necessarily in an intellectual way, but in more of a deep way. It's kind of like the sense of the self. Of course, the kidneys are related with really the deepest energies in the body, right? So the spirit of the kidney, you would think, would be a very deep core spirit energy in the body, or a deep core aspect of the psyche. So in a lot of ways, it's kind of like, the will is, I think, maybe short-selling the Zhi in a lot of ways. I think of it more like your sense of self and your sense of your ability to be, to have a sense of being, let's say, just to take space in the world, to take up space in the world. Maybe that's definitely a poor way to describe that, but. Do you guys have any sense of, have you heard anything about Zhi that you have a sense of any other concepts for how you relate to it? Just curious.
I mean, I have a lot, but I've also, I have my own filter that I filter
Yeah.
a lot of stuff through. So
Yeah.
It's not going to be
Please share. Like I said, this is the one that I have the least to say about, I think.
I mean, I think about it connected because I think of the water element in general with
Mhm.
evolution and the deep ancestors, not even human ancestors, but every life from
Mhm.
evolution. So
Yeah.
I think of it like that, the kind of will to survive kind of thing.
Okay.
And at the cellular level,
Yeah.
I think a lot about the water in the body being expressed through the cells.
Yeah.
So I think of that kind of membrane. It's similar.
Yeah.
If I want to do a meditation on the will, I would think like you're saying, taking up space, a really fat water droplet. They're bigger than themselves.
Yeah.
Sticky.
I think I think you're right, and I think probably this is a really good thing to put here. It's like survival because it's going to be a very core, instinctual, deep kind of spirit aspect of ourself. So in a lot of ways, kind of you could say this kind of connects here because it's like it's like a preservation kind of thing, It's like it's your will to live. Yeah, it's like it's our will, but what's the core will? The core aspect of the will is the will to be here. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right, unconscious drive.
I think of it as, with relating to willpower, the ability to hold an intention for a long time, to follow through with things. Sort of just that grounding aspect of the Shen, to have
Right.
these directions, but to be able to be firm and resolute in how you act on that.
So again, this is, I think, what I was trying to get to with this, and this is where I poorly wrote this. It's like your ability to manifest things. Manifest I didn't use deliberately because there's so much weird buzz around that word. It's your ability, but manifest in the sense that I've come up with a plan, that's from the E. You were able to do it because the Shen is in the body, so you're awake and you're conscious. You can come up with a plan using the E, and then your ability to have fortitude. Maybe fortitude is the word I'm looking for here. Your fortitude to carry out that plan and execute it. Let's call it executive fortitude. I think that
Trending word,
grit, yeah. Grit. Yeah. So these are the aspects. So often I think this might be really clinically relevant for a lot of people because I have a ton of people that come in and they're like, I want to lose weight so badly, but I can't not eat bad, I can't stick to whatever it is. Or, I mean, that's just an example you hear a lot. But with anything, I think that you'll see this where people are like, I really want to do this, or I want to leave this partner, but I can't, or whatever, So that's stuff that has to do with the Zhi. Yeah.
Two things. One, when we're talking about this, I'm just seeing roots and the sort of it's kind of an embodiment, but it's like an energetic
expression of what you pull from to manifest in the world, right? So like, that's kind of what I'm seeing. But I'm curious, like, you were saying it takes time to develop, it arises from a well-balanced diet and environment. So
Yeah.
what happens when people don't have that in their developmental stages? Like,
Yeah.
how can that be addressed with Chinese medicine? Is that going to be with like kidney tonification, or like
Yeah.
what would you?
Well, I mean, I can tell you the first herb that I think about is duhua. This is like one of the main herbs for this. Enters into the dumai. It's all about developing a sense of, even Jeffrey always translates this. Jeffrey has poetic translations for everything. He translates this herb as self-reliant existence.
That's
So-
in Bensky.
Is it from Bensky too? Okay. Well, maybe it comes from somewhere else then, but yeah. So this concept of like having a sense of like yourself, and in a lot of ways, this concept also that we're talking about right now really ties in a lot with the Chow Mai too. So looking at like the concept of like what's happening with the Chow Mai, Yin Chow Mai, Yang Chow Mai balance. But yeah, I would think about tonifying the kidneys for sure. I mean, you want someone to be using their bones. You know, like you want people to be doing physical things in the physical body, like weightlifting. You want them to be doing some kind of exercises where they are feeling their bones regularly, strengthening the bones. You want to do things that are probably building the kidney yang. Again, these are all the yang aspects of the organs. So if you want to strengthen that spirit, that means you have to make the organ more yang. That organ system has to go more yang. So you have to do all the things to make it go more yang. So be it, telling them to go do sauna all the time, putting them in this really yang environment, or eating really yang foods, or doing yang supplements or herbs, or doing really yang activities, or whatever it may be. You have to polarize toward that trajectory. So the quick answer for this would be, if it seems like the jur is deficient, tonify kidney yang.
And is conceptually a jur deficiency something that can be remedied later? Since
Sure.
it's such a foundational component.
Always you can remedy stuff. I always tell people, especially when you have patients come in that are completely despondent and they have zero hope and everything, and it's like, we're biological systems. Biological systems are always moving in one direction or the other, or oftentimes in many directions, and you can always get better or get worse, but you're never staying static, ever. So it's like every single decision that you make, it's like you're constantly shifting the system in one direction or the other. So every thought that you have, everything you eat, everything that you do or don't do, it's like, it's like, what's that prayer that says, God, forgive me for the things that I've left undone, There's one of those prayers for, it's like the things that I've done and the things I've left undone. So it's everything that you're doing or not doing, it's like it's going to shift the system one way or the other. So this, for sure, you can strengthen this, yeah. And often it doesn't even take that long. But yeah. This is like go to the military or something. It's like get beat up all the time and then you develop. It's grit. Like who said grit? It's like grit. Yeah. It's like grit. So.
They get confused things. The jur is housed in the kidney, and the opinion for kidney is Shen.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah. So,
Also,
but different word.
It's a different word.
Yeah.
But so the phonetics is not lost in Chinese. They're always playing with homonyms.
Okay.
Right? So the Shen, the character for Shen, one of the radicals is like a vessel, so it have the capacity to hold things.
Huh. Wait. Okay. So what is? I know it's got this.
Yeah.
It's got this.
Right. So yeah. So this is the.
Draw it for us.
This is the vessel radical.
Okay.
So this is kidney.
So this is the radical for yin,
This is
or for like moon or whatever.
no, well, this is the radical for moon, but it's also the radical for flesh, right?
Right. So whenever you have like an organ or something, they put these with it, meaning
Right.
it's like something like a yeah.
So this is your
So it's the
character for kidney.
okay.
But
So
this
so you're saying that this radical has to do with
This radical has to do with a vessel, so it has the capacity to hold things is that radical.
yeah, and so it's probably really deep philosophical statement with that. I mean, because the kidneys are ultimately the reception of the spirit. It's like it's like, and so maybe the concept, of course, being in a body at all, you have like the idea that you have Shen in the sense of the spirit, like the heart, or whatever. You have the Shen connecting down with the Jing, and this is conception. This is being in a body. And of course this is Chongmai here. This Chongmai. So like that is being in the body. And if you have conception, if you successfully conceive a child or something, this is what this means. This. So it's probably really deep in that way. Yeah, it's like, you know, you have the Shen, but really the Shen is always housed in the kidneys, kind of, in a way. Or it's anchored in that way. So it's the ultimate anchor for the spirits. So, okay, cool. I feel like I learned something about you.
Muli, anchoring the spirit.
Muli?
Sorry, just
Yeah.
randomly.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and we'll see, clinically, we'll see that it's always these mineral substances that are the most popular things that are used to anchor the spirit. Yeah. It's, and we can talk about that a little bit more too. Okay. So that's Zhi. So let's look at Hun and Po now. So we've covered all the ones that are not Hun and Po. So let's look at Hun and Po. I think Hun's it's actually pronounced Hun, right? How do you say it? Mandarin forever eludes me, so I'm always very self-conscious trying to say the words. But okay, so these spirits exist kind of in opposition to one another. So Hun's associated with what? Liver, right? So over here we have the wood, and then Po is metal. So over here we have, lung rather. So over here we have metal. And these, of course, are in opposition to one another. Wood being the rising dynamic in the body, and metal being the sinking, condensing dynamic in the body. So already we see they've associated them with these opposite energetics. We've already got this kind of idea of this being like the yang spirit and this being the yin spirit. Both of these characters, they call them they call them both Gui. So they have the character ghost in them. And Hun is they say like they have cloud. So it's like the cloud ghost. And then for Po, they have white. So Po's like the white ghost. So let's start with Hun. Okay, so Hun has this liver resonance, right? I already touched on this, but what tissues are associated with the liver? Okay, so sinews, what else? Sinews, nerves. Yeah, and all nails, so all the keratin-based tissues in the body. Nails, hair, cornea of the eyes, all the keratin-based tissues. If you're a turtle, it's your shell. Everything that's got keratin as the foundation, that's the liver tissue. So the resonance of the liver spirit is going to be through these tissues. It's going to be the liver system. So like with the Shen, we said it's housed in the blood, right? So the system of the heart is the arteries and veins. So that's where the blood's mostly being stored. For the liver, the system is primarily going to feature the nerves. And it's mostly going to be your central nervous system is the main house for the Hun. So mostly we're thinking about the resonance of the Hun being central nervous system and very specifically brain is kind of the place where you're going to see the Hun go. The reason we see this brain resonance is because the wood element and the liver has this strong rising energetic, and we're talking about the most yang aspect of the liver system. So the most yang aspect of the liver system, remember the liver terminates at DU20, the channel itself reaches all the way up into the brain. The liver is the organ system which moves things into the brain, and the gallbladder moves things out of the brain. The nerves are very much, completely liver territory. So when we're thinking about Hun, we're thinking about what is the spirit that's in our brain. Okay, so Shen's associated with your heart, Hun's associated with your brain. So already you can see that we're going to have this kind of all these clinical things related to the Hun based on that. So any kind of brain issues we can start to think are going to have to some degree they're going to be related to Hun. So let's look at what does the Hun do? So what do you guys know about the Hun?
Comes and goes.
Okay, what does that mean?
It means
It's like a
It's
country
the body
song.
during the day.
Yeah. Okay. So at night it wanders. So at night it wanders.
I thought it wanders during the day.
Wanders at night. If it wanders during the day, that's when you're getting like waking hallucinations and you're getting dream states when you're awake.
Oh.
Yeah. So the idea would be that during the day, the Hun is housed in the liver. And remember, the liver is not just the liver organ, the liver is the liver system. So that includes all the nervous system, and really it's practically speaking mostly housed in the brain. And then at night, it's wandering. And they say that very specifically that the Hun is triune, by the way. There's 3 Hun, right? You guys know this concept? See, this is called foreshadowing. So there's a trinity, and they're in Taoism they're related to the Shangqing, the Yuqing, and the what's the other clarity that they use in Taoism? Anybody that's a Taoist aficionado? I've had my head out of it for a little while. They always relate him to like Lao Tzu and whoever else. But if you go into a Taoist temple, you'll see on the altar, they have 3 old men, usually with like kind of silk robes and these beards. And those 3 old men are called the kind of like this like Trinity that's associated with like the 3 clarities of the 3 types of heaven. What is the third one? I can't remember now. But anyway, that's related to the 3 aspects of the Hun. So in Taoism, they're always doing internal, external reflection. So that's related to the 3 aspects of the Hun. So this triune Hun, they say that it wanders at night, and it's attached to the body by these 3 silver cords that tie at due 9. Okay, so there's this leash that holds the Hun in the body. So this is Taoist lore. There's this leash that holds the Hun in the body, and it's these 3 silver cords, and they tie in at due 9. So this is the idea, is at night that the Hun is wandering. And really what we're seeing is at night there is this loosening of the matrices. If we have, let's say again, to use like New Age terminology, you have the physical body, the astral body, and the mental body. These are all normally tied together very tightly. And if you're normally functioning, these are going to be tied together fairly tightly. And when you sleep, all of these loosen. These layers loosen up. And your consciousness, of course, is completely letting go. The body goes into a hyper yin state, and then the spirit goes into a hyper yang state. So you have this loosening of everything.
So like sinews relaxing.
The sinews completely relax. In fact, the sinews can't even contract during certain sleep states, right? You're totally paralyzed. And paralysis is one of the signs of the person doesn't have a Hun. Their liver yang is absent, because the liver yang is your capacity to move your body. That's the nervous system, right? So it's like the Hun, which is normally what moves our body, which is what normally allows us to function in the body, it's off wandering somewhere, and the body is left without that liver yang component. It goes into a very yin state. So we're going into this. So we're always kind of having this oscillation where we're dipping in and out of these yang and yin states. We have the day when we're kind of in this state where everything's joined together, and the physical body is in this state where it's like conducting all this electricity, it's conducting all this yang qi, and it's operating. And then at night, you have this kind of departure where you have this depolarization, and that depolarization is facilitating proper maintenance and longevity in the tissues and all these other things that's happening, things we don't even know about for a lot of it.
Waking up with tension, is that the Hun not moving enough? Too anchored?
What do you mean waking? Like in the morning when you wake up, you feel tension?
Yeah, like if someone wakes up and they're like, oh, more achy in the morning kind of thing.
Often, yeah, maybe often people aren't getting to a deep sleep state, maybe. Could be, yeah.
So it's connected to the central nervous system. So if there's undigested trauma, would this be why people might have dissociative states from trauma, because the Hun can't rest in the central nervous system because there's too much chaos?
You're saying is this why people would have dissociation?
Well, I mean, I'm sure there's multiple reasons, but especially like trauma-related dissociative states.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about like issues where people have kind of like, where they would do like traditional like soul retrieval and stuff like that. You can, I mean, this is like when someone's done too much acid and then they're not really, all together anymore. Like they've fragmented their spirit or something, That's often the hun which has been scattered, or the hun which has become lost, usually this way, let's say traditionally. That stuff definitely can happen. Yeah, or with trauma it happens for sure too,
Trauma is like a lot of my focus. And
yeah.
With the nervous system is where a lot of it obviously gets stored.
Sure.
And so since that's what houses the hun, I guess I'm just curious about that connection, if there's a lot of dysregulation in the nervous system and the hun can't just settle there.
Yeah. So we could say that, if you have a dissociation of the Shen, again, you're going to have that feeling of this absence, this like, the absence behind the eyes. If they have dissociation of the E, which maybe we wouldn't even use that terminology like that, maybe a weakness of the E, then you'll have certain symptoms. With the hun, you're going to get, if there's a dissociation of the hun, you're going to have the person's still going to have a sense of being not present with themselves as much, but it'll manifest more, like I said, with kind of like waking dream states or feeling extremely spaced out all the time. What you'll get is often you'll get this polarization toward too much like of a yang state of the liver, where the person's this happens when people even when people smoke too much weed, this happens. Where the person, in fact, when people smoke weed, this is what is happening, is you're getting a dilation of, like a polarization toward the yang and a dilation of the astral body and the mental body. You're getting a loosening out of everything, and it's because the liver is going to a more of a yang state. So any of these things that cause the liver to go into a very yang state, you're going to get all this loosening up, the yin qi becomes weaker, the yang qi becomes excess, and then, you can get this kind of like expansive feeling, which is what people are talking about when they feel high. There's an expansiveness of the energy field, but at the same time, if that happens permanently, then someone's constantly very open, super spaced out, all these things.
So would you want to probably like tonify liver yin and liver blood at that
you're doing things that are astringent. You're doing things that, which is again the yin quality, right? This is the direction of yin qi. This is what yin qi does. So if you want to stabilize the yin qi, sour is the flavor that does it, right? Which often we don't think about that much. But if someone acutely has their yin, like a yin collapse or something, or if their yin is really weak and they have all these symptoms arising from that, if you want to, in the moment, get the yin qi to stabilize, you do something sour, and it mimics having yin qi. So, this is definitely one of the strategies for thinking about with these things. And we're kind of maybe getting ahead of ourselves a little bit with this. But okay, so we know the hun wanders at night. So when it's wandering at night, it gives us dreams. So we've already talked about this, but dream states are related to the hun. The hun, and by the way, this by extension is going to mean visions, hallucinations, auditory or visual hallucinations. These are all symptoms normally of excess activity in the hun. They would say that the hun is polarized to yang. It's not coming to rest in the body properly. You have the hun moving about in the collective unconscious or wherever it moves about when it's not present in the body, and it's giving these kind of qualities. So, so this is often what you're looking at with symptoms of the hun being disturbed or in excess. The hun enters the body through Du 20, or the fontanelle. This is why babies have a soft spot. They say that that's like receiving the hun, and then that hardens to kind of prevent the hun leaving at a certain point. The Maya actually had a really interesting, or maybe it was even the pre-Maya civilization, they had a really interesting practice of putting a gold disc in the fontanelle before it would harden, so the bones would gather around it. And so it stayed there for your whole life. You had this like gold disc in the top of the head, and it was meant to maintain a connection with heaven. And you see similar practices in the Chinese culture, but it was always funerary practices where they would put like these pieces of jade in all of the orifices and everything. And it was meant to facilitate the passage of the spirit into the afterlife or into the heavens. But so it enters and exits through Du 20. Of course, that's the terminal point of the liver. So this is the end of the liver channel. This is going to be a really important point then for when you're trying to do anything with the Hun. If you want to do treatments, acupuncture treatments with the Hun, Du20 is an important point. And so don't forget that this is on the liver channel. And so anytime someone has these kind of symptoms or everything, you can always use Du20 to sedate the Hun.
Could you use it to call it in as well, or the different?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, if it's like if there's not enough activity in the Hun. Yeah. And
Wake it up or calm it down.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. Like the Zen master slapping the person on the head with a wooden sword. Yeah.
And part of Du20 is it can either raise or lower the chi as well, so it can go both ways in terms of
Yeah. So we already covered this a little bit, but this is the liver yang. So this is the elusive liver yang that is never talked about clinically, except to say that it's in excess. Liver yang excess, liver yang rising. But if you have liver yang deficiency, that looks like, I mean, have you guys talked about this at all? So what would liver yang deficiency look like?
I mean, is it similar to like what they talk about gallbladder stuff, like indecisive and?
No, not necessarily. Think more physical.
Lethargy, weak sinews.
Yeah, so weakness
Like freeze states in the nervous system.
weakness on the progression to paralysis. And this is why you see these are Jueyin patterns.
Yeah, we sometimes think about like liver blood, maybe like numbness and stuff.
Yeah, it's going to be how functional is your nervous system? How well can you conduct a synapse through the nerves, and how well is that communicating with the skeletal muscles?
Would that be like freeze states in the nervous system?
What do you mean?
Freeze states?
Well, I don't know the terminology. What does that mean?
It's part of the polyvagal model of
Okay.
it's basically this idea that, you know, if we can't fight or flee, that there will be a freeze response, and basically everything just kind of starts to go offline. So a lot of times people will be in sort of like functional freeze states where it's really hard to just kind of, it feels like driving with the e-brake on,
Okay.
sort of. I mean, I think that it would match to that
Yeah,
pattern.
it sounds like it could very well tie in with that. Yeah, that might be something good to kind of, tease out and, develop a little bit of theory around that. But yeah, so the Hun, when it is in deficiency, is going to look like weakness, paralysis. It's going to look like an inability to summon your energy to get up and move properly. And of course, to a lesser degree than, this sounds really intense, we're also seeing lethargy and depression. So there's so many types of depression, because that word is really used to describe a lot of different states. But this is the type of depression where people feel like they can't get up, they can't move. Or maybe that feeling of stuckness could be there. But often people are laying in bed and they're like, they have zero willpower, maybe the willpower plays into that, but zero capacity to or zero interest in moving. So you could say that the Hun is in a deficiency state there. So that's cases where you would want to be warming up the liver and stimulating the Hun.
So is liver yang deficiency and Hun deficiency, is that the same thing?
Yeah, it's the liver yang. I mean, it's always on a spectrum. So it's like you always have like this sandwich of like from the most yang to the most yin things that you could describe. So it's like we could say that right in the middle probably is the organ itself. And then up at the very top, you're going to have the Hun. And then down at the very bottom, you're going to have this would be like the Jing level of the organ. So this would be like the functional state, or maybe the physical state of like the genetic quality of the organ or something. It's like the actual substance of the tissues themselves. How well are they able to be produced regularly? And then it's like all the fluids and everything that are associated. It's like the myelin on the nerves is in here somewhere. It's like all these things. And then as you come up, you have the thinner fluids and the chi and all this stuff and the blood that's in the organ. So there's always this sandwich of things, this whole list of like what are the yin versus most yang versus most yin aspects of an organ. But yeah, this is the most yang aspect of the liver. So what else?
Someone had system-wide nerve pain. Would you correlate that with the Hun in some way?
I would say if there's a like an overfiring, like with epilepsy, that's this is like if someone has, or not even just epilepsy, if someone has a seizure, that's like the Hun is in this like hyperactive state temporarily. If you just have pain, it's not necessarily a hyperactivity, though. It can come from blood stagnation. It can come from cold. Well, maybe not cold with nerve pain, but often it comes from like blood stagnation or sometimes from heat, sometimes from yin deficiency. It can be different things. So you would want to look and see kind of signs. So if we're looking for like signs for this, we would probably see some degree of the person's going to be like hyperactive, and they're going to have like mental qualities of some kind of like maybe even mania or hyperactivity or something like that's going to come along with it. You would want to see in the pulse that the person has this like very excess pulse at the surface, and maybe they don't have a lot of presence at the deeper levels. So it's like all the yang qi is up at the surface and maybe a floating pulse or an unrooted pulse or something like that.
So you'd have to see multiple things that would then tell you this might be a hun issue.
Yeah, you'd be looking
Not
for like,
just like
yeah.
a blood in some other
Yeah, you'd be looking for other diagnostic criteria with it. But really the big giveaway is that the person's having like waking, like dissociative, dreamy type states. And then, yeah, of course, the treatment for this is if the person has an excess in that system, the treatment's going to be nourishing liver yin and anchoring the hun. And so you're going to be looking at all the acupuncture points to nourish liver yin, as well as usually mineral substances. So you mentioned Mu Li already. So Mu Li is not, it doesn't, yeah. So we have these calcium substances. Let me erase some of this. So if we have excess in the hun, or excess hun activity, it's not excess in the hun, excess hun activity, then we would use mineral substances. We have like calcium mineral substances that we use. So that's like Mu Li, Zhenjimu, Longu is silicon based, right? Isn't it? Because it's technically quartz. Yeah, I think. So we have like silica-based things too. So that would be like longu, because it's technically, I think, you have the bone which has been completely replaced with quartz, even though it was bone. Both of these are calcium carbonate. So calcium carbonate is also like Tums, right? Isn't it? Is that what Tums is? Aragonite is another one that sometimes you'll see. Aragonite of any form. That's calcium carbonate. Longu is pretty much going to be silica dioxide. We have magnesium-based things, or things that have more magnesium in them. Also up here with the calcium heavy ones, we're going to see things like seaweed. Very nourishing for the liver yin. So the seaweeds that they use in Chinese medicine are like kombu. And what's the other one they use? Like wakame in Japanese. Oh yeah, haitsao just means seaweed, right?
Would the Mu Li and Zhenjimu be manifestations of those organisms' hun, since they're basically their shell?
No, I wouldn't think of it that way. It would be because that's like the liver yin. Like the substance part is the liver yin. So yeah, so those shells, in a way, actually that's an interesting correlation that I've never really thought about. So like shells are like the liver yin of the animal. So you're like using actually a liver yin substance. Yeah. So maybe you could look at it that way. Definitely an easy way to remember that. So yeah. Calcium is extremely sedative. You can use calcium as a sedative on people. If people have like hyperactivity or if they're unanchored or whatever, I will just get people to get chewable calcium and just eat that as a supplement. And that's one of the first things I'll do if people have trouble winding down at night or if they have anxiety. Always first thing is get them on minerals, because minerals are very sedative. So usually the main minerals that you're looking at are going to be calcium, magnesium, iron, and there's other things that sometimes, well, these are the most anchoring ones. Let's say these are the most anchoring ones. And with iron, of course, what's the iron mineral that they always recommend for this? It is iron oxide.
I can't remember. Is that the sure one, the magnetism?
No. Oh yeah, magnetite is one. Hematite is the other. So hematite and magnetite. Yeah. Hematite is Dai-zhi, and magnetite is, what's magnetite? Does anyone remember? Yeah, I think that's right. So hematite and magnetite are both used, and iron substances are going to have a strong resonance with the liver. The other one I was going to write here has a strong resonance with the liver. That's copper. So also you can include copper in this as one of the minerals that people get. Normally the first thing I do for people, though, is, by the way, I don't know if there's any magnesium-based, just magnesium salts are one that they'll use like this, right? So like, it's like, yeah, Mengshao, yeah.
It's not Epsom, it's like something
But yeah, just, magnesium salts in general. What I do normally is I forego having people go and get a bunch of herbs and I just get them to take a mineral supplement. So almost always, if someone comes in and they're saying, I'm super spaced out, I'm super dissociative, or they're presenting with sleep problems, dream disturbed sleep, all these things, these excesses in the Hun, then normally it's just get them on a stack where they're doing calcium at about 1 gram per day. They're doing magnesium at about 600 milligrams per day. This is to start, and you can up it a little bit if it seems like they're not responding. They're doing iron the iron's variable. Usually, actually, I tell people to get iron from the diet. So this is like eating lots of meat or things like that. And then you can supplement, like I said, the trace minerals like copper and zinc and things like that too. But these are like helping to supplement, nourish the body's capacity for yin, qi, and housing the spirits. So this is kind of my first pass recommendation for that stuff. And then secondarily, you can always use bitter herbs because bitter is very grounding. And bitter drives down. So bitter is like aggressively directing the spirit down, whereas a mineral substance, salty things, cause the qi to sink because saltiness creates more of a yin resonance in the body. It causes the qi to coalesce and become heavy and come to rest in the body, whereas bitter substances drive the qi down. So if you want to aggressively force the Hun to go down, you use something bitter. If you want to kind of draw the Hun in and cause it to coalesce and be housed better, you're going to use these salty substances. By the way, seaweed's really good for this too. So I just kind of mentioned this in passing, but seaweed is really good. Also spirulina and things like that, chlorella. Okay, so that's the Hun pretty much. Any more to say about that?
Could you repeat what you said about the Hun being threefold or tri-resonant?
Yeah. I haven't looked at it in a while, but there's 3 Hun and there's 7 Po. So the 3 Hun are related to the Shangqi. It's like you have the Shangqing, the Yuqing is the highest one, and the something else Qing, and I can't remember. These are the 3 clarities. So the biggest school of Taoism is called the Shangqing school of Taoism. Jeffrey's school is called the Yuqing school of Taoism. And this is called the upper clarity, I think. And maybe Shangqing, they relate to upper clarity. I don't remember. But anyway, some other Qing, and these are like the 3 aspects of the Hun. It's like a trinity aspect. And it's just the way that they talk about it. They'll say that the Hun is like triune, and it's like these heavenly spirits have this trinity quality to them, it seems like, in almost every culture.
Just thinking in my head, is it one Hun with just like 3 qualities, or is it 3 smaller Huns that make up the Hun in our body?
I think that probably my view of it is too colored by the Christian concept of the Trinity to be able to really tease it out, because I've never studied Taoism so deeply that I would really have the nuance with it, I think. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Thinking of the 7 Po, are there 7 Po or 7 facets of 1 Po?
The way they talk about it is they talk about it, with the Po at least, they talk about it as having 7 Po.
Okay.
So with the Hun, though, it's much more like the conversation is kind of like it's a triune aspect of a single thing. So it's kind of like, it's like a single item that's reflected with 3 rays or something.
It's Tai Ching.
Tai Ching. So Tai, okay. So the great clarity, the upper clarity, the jade clarity. So these are the three-way. This is how they talk about it. And like I said, if you look up any Taoist altar, they're going to have these, and they relate them to Confucius. I think it's like Confucius, Lao Tzu, and somebody else. But they're always associated with like three of the elders. They also call them like the three great elders. So anyway, that's the Hun. So the Po, like I said, the Po is called the white ghost. By the way, this word they use for Gui, are you guys familiar with this term? This term Gui, right? I'm sure you've heard it plenty. So when we're talking about a spirit which is outside the body, they call it a Gui. And when we're talking about a spirit which is inside the body, which is incarnate, then they call it a Ling. So you'll see this terminology with the Hun and the Po. So with the Hun, they'll call it the Hun Gui, and then they'll have the Ling Hun.
I was trying to ask it. Nobody could explain.
So yeah, this character Ling is this means that it's incarnate. So Ling means an incarnate spirit. Incarnate meaning in the flesh. So these are the terms that you'll see with these things. So they'll do the same with Po. So they'll have Po Gui and Ling Po. So that's how you'll see. That's like the way that's the kind of way that they'll write it. So that's disembodied versus embodied. And this character is cool too. Do you guys? So this top part of the character is like rain. And then these are like three mouths. So it's like rain, and then these are three mouths, or like orifices. And then this bottom character means a witch or a wizard.
Wow.
So the idea is the image is that the spirits rain down from heaven. They enter into the orifice, and then they create like this kind of shaman character or whatever. So that's what the characters looks like. That's like the concept of it. So the image is literally like the spirit comes down and comes in the body.
That reinforces the idea that the Shen comes in through the mouth too.
Yeah.
Or that spirit
Well,
comes
yeah,
in
I
through
mean,
the mouth.
they also use this word just to mean like a door. So it also just means like door. But yeah, so Hun's coming in through the top, Shen's coming in from here, and then what about the Po? Where's the Po come in? Jenna's not here. She was talking about it earlier. She's going to hate it. So the Po comes in from the butt, as Jenna said. Jenna, we were just asking where the Po comes into the body. Yeah. Okay, but question though, so it's like the Po's associated with the lungs. Why are they saying it enters and exits through the anus? Any inklings?
That's the closest to the earth, and it's a terrestrial spirit.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know if I have the direct answer to it. What? Because we're upside down? Are you saying because we're upside down in the uterus?
Yeah, that's what I said.
So remember the Hun has this resonance with the wood element. The wood element has this rising energy, right? The wood element terminates here. The lung energy has a metal element resonance. The metal is a sinking resonance. So the spirit associated with the metal is going to dwell in the lower body because the metal has this, the metal is the sinking energetic in the body. It's like, of course, we have other organs or other systems which go down, stomach, urinary bladder, gallbladder, they all descend. They can all be used to ground the chi. But the lung is the organ that grounds the chi. The lung is what holds the spirits in the body. So we were saying like the Shen, kind of lives in the blood, but if you cut off the breath, then the Shen departs immediately, the Hun departs immediately. So the lungs are like this important pump which holds the spirits in the body. And it holds them in the body by constantly grounding and maintaining this kind of yin field in the body. It's keeping everything held in. So because the metal element has this strong sinking quality, what we see is that the Po live in the lumbar spine and the sacrum. So we're going to see the 7 Po are living in this region. Okay, so the resonance is in the lumbar spine and the sacrum. So The idea is that the Po are related with your carnal, it's the carnal aspect of the mind. So that's the perfect way to say it in English, because everything you think of with kind of the carnal aspects and the Christian connotation of like carnal sins or like the kind of sins of the flesh, these are the 7 deadly sins. So the Po are related with lust, they're related with greed, they're related with gluttony, they're related with all these things that you would think of as being kind of these aspects of the mind, which are the fleshly aspects of the mind, the animal nature of ourselves. That's the Po. So in that way, they're the most yin, they're the most related with the flesh. So we could say for the Po, we're looking at our animal instincts. By the way, I glossed over it, but with the Hun, that's the spirit that goes to heaven when you die. That's the heavenly spirit. That's the heavenly ghost, and literally the character kind of reads as the heavenly ghost. You know, they say the cloud ghost, or it's like the etheric ghost or something. So that's the spirit that goes to heaven when you die, meets up with Metatron or whomever, and then comes back. So that's that one. And it's the one that's meant to maintain a connection across time, right? So you guys have heard that spiel, I'm sure, right? Yeah. So the Po are inherited through the flesh. They don't come from heaven. They come from the earth. And so what that means is they are a resonance of the flesh. They're coming from, normally you would say they're inherited qualities, or the things that are coming kind of through your parents. So a lot of people connect this to karma, because the karma is going to be a resonance in the DNA. It's like, what did your parents do, that, was so evil? They did something really bad, and now you've inherited this bad karma from them or something. The Taoist metaphor for this, or the paradigm, or the way they'll talk about it, is that when 2 people are having sex, it creates this light, and this light attracts Po, kind of like moths to a flame. And the Po come in, and then they try to get in the baby. So that's like the way the Taoists will talk about it. But practically speaking, normally you would think about this as these are spirits which move in the flesh. When an animal dies and it decays, then the Po seep down into the earth with the fluids and the tissues that are decaying. If you eat an animal, you absorb the Po. It's going to become a resonance in your body. So they go into the flesh, they go into the soil of your body, into the intestines, and that Po resonance can kind of become absorbed there. So this is how you take on the qualities of an animal, like if you want to become really brave and you're a warrior and you kill a tiger and you eat its heart or take a bite of the heart or something. This is absorbing the Po. You're not absorbing the Shen, you're not taking on the qualities from the Hun, it's from the Po. The Po is transferable within nature. And the Po is not unique to you. The Po is it's something that can move across different bodies. So the Hun is unique to you. The Shen is not unique to you. The Hun is the only one that has a unique imprint to you. So the Hun, in a lot of ways, this is why I say people, this is like, we consider the Hun as like the higher self. Because the Hun is like the only aspect of the self that is going to be more differentiated and specific. This is like collective memory over the course of many lifetimes, that sort of thing. With a Po, it's like if you have a Po that's like a really greedy Po, let's say your ancestors were in a really bad famine and they didn't have resources for many generations, they would develop this complex, and that complex of the mind would pass down into their kids, and now their kids, they gain weight and they can't lose weight because their cells won't let go of anything. So the cells are very greedy. They won't let anything go. So you just hold everything that you get and you hoard it. That's an aspect of the Po.
It's like epigenetics.
Yeah, all this stuff is going to tie into some degree with that stuff. But absolutely, the Po is very related with DNA, genetic expression, that sort of thing. So traditionally they would say animal instincts, right? We're think like 7 deadly sins. This is how this is the traditional way they look at it. And traditionally they would say you want to get rid of your Po. So this is a spirit you're always trying to get rid of. So the idea is that the Po unlock sequentially with the cycles of 7 and 8. So every cycle of 7 and 8, you are resonating with one of your Po. And during that cycle, you are supposed to eliminate that Po. You're supposed to resolve the Po. So this is all Taoist lore again. But the idea is that when you're in that cycle, that is going to be a prevalent theme in your life. You're going to notice that suddenly you're attracting tons of people that really piss you off, and you're getting really, really mad all the time. And it's like, okay, can you manage this and be graceful or benevolent or whatever it is and resolve it properly? So once you resolve the Po, so when the Po are active, they're meant to be exerting kind of a directive on your life. So the idea is that the Po have some directive on the life. They are to some degree co-opting your free will, and they are attracting circumstances that are creating certain things to happen in your life. This is the concept of kind of how they tie in with maybe karma or destiny to a certain degree. You could say, okay, you're destined to be poor, for this part of your life or whatever. That's the Po. Once you resolve the Po, theoretically, you no longer have those things conspiring to put certain things in your life. You're completely free to do everything you want. So the idea is the Taoists are always trying to get rid of the Po. And that's why you'll see a lot of the Taoist meditations and everything start with opening the lumbar spine. And all these practices involve opening and circulating lots of qi, and especially lots of yang qi through the lumbar spine. Warming up that area, stimulating that circulation. And the idea is it's going to stimulate these things to turn over more quickly. And if you effectively activate a bunch of Po all at once, your life will feel calamitous. And this is kind of how people start to talk about, when someone becomes enlightened or they become nearly enlightened, their life falls apart for a while. This is some of the things that you'll hear in certain circles. So they activate every 7 years or 8 years, and you try to resolve them. And in Taoism, they'll say if you don't resolve it, it becomes one of the worms. So they'll say there are these worms that kind of decay the flesh. So the idea is that if it's not resolved, you'll have multiple Po that are active simultaneously. The Po can become corrupted. They can start to kind of fester in a way, and it becomes this negative aspect of the psyche. I shouldn't say negative. It becomes this poisonous or toxic aspect of the psyche. And so that's the concept with Po. The Po always have this very kind of dark, toxic connotation in most of the traditional circles. You'll see if you look at pictures of the way the Taoists drew the Po are always drawn as kind of like grotesque or crippled or whatever. And so there's this weird stigma about the Po. Yeah.
I'm thinking of just that location, the body, and the location of the daimai, how you can store stuff that you kind of left unresolved in the daimai. Is there any relation between the two?
Well, daimai interfaces directly with kidney divergent. But I've never heard of it really interfacing directly with the Po. I don't know. I've never thought of it, and I've never heard anything about it. So I'd have to think about it a little bit more. But nothing comes to mind offhand for that. But maybe. Yeah, maybe. Because, things that are stored in the daimai can definitely pass on to your kids. Through, this resonance with kidney divergent and then the genitals and everything. So, I don't know. But anyway, this is the basic concept of the Po. So when the Po are in pathological states, so if you have pathological states of the Po, then normally what you're looking for here is deviant behavior associated with, this is like mentally deviant people. And so when you'll see these kind of different states associated with different organ systems too. For instance, sexual deviance is associated with the liver, right? So they'll talk about bleeding liver 5 for people that have sexual deviant tendencies. But again, 7 deadly sins, all the deviants. So it's like deviance around, all the animal things. So it's around like food, sex, survival in different ways. So like fighting, rage and things like that. It's all these kind of very basic animalistic tendencies. When you see those kind of deviations that feel like they're coming from a very deep place, and it seems like the person's hyper-reactive in that very deep way, and often you see it with kids even, kids bizarrely reactive in some way or super deviant. Usually they would say that's a Po type thing. So when you're treating the Po, you needle these points down here. You're needling sacral points, and then, so there's 7 of them. So you're needling the 4 sacral foramen, and then the 3 vertebral points above that.
The one of use?
Yeah, I don't know. Or the shoe points, I guess. Yeah. But
It would be like the LI shoe point, so it'd have like a.
yeah. And I think maybe even one of these, isn't one of these called the white ring shoe?
I think
Where's that
that's
one?
A little lower. I mean, it's in that region, but I think it's like out from the sacrum a little bit.
Oh, yeah. But I think that's a reference to the Po. Because again, the Po, they have this kind of motif of like the white. So you're looking at deviant behaviors like this. This is going to be irregularities in the Po. If the Po are hyperactive, if you have too much activity of these things, you can sedate the Po. And normally when you're sedating the Po, you're doing things that are going to be strengthening the lungs and strengthening that ability to sink everything down and kind of almost as like you're reeling the Po in. Very much they talk about the Po, like the imagery with the Po, it's always like it's like these kind of like wild things that are living in the body, and you're trying to tame them, and you're trying to subdue them, and you're trying to get rid of them. Very unusual for Taoists to talk about things in such a way, but that's how they always talk about this. I don't know what other insights I have about the Po. Do you guys have any other insights about it? Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of like in indigenous cultures, they talk about how there's 2 types of wolves in you.
Oh, yeah.
It just reminds me of that.
Yeah. And the one that you feed is the one that grows, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So you've got 7 wolves inside of you. And
They turn into worms.
yeah. Yeah, and they can turn into worms and they can consume the flesh. And by the way, the Po are often one of the factors, or often these are the factors that cause people to not be able to pass on. So this is one of the reasons also for resolving the Po and not feeding the Po when you're alive, because you don't want to be stuck as a earthbound Gui. Yeah. So this is also the idea of, like, the ghosts are hungry because they have these carnal desires that are unmet. So this is all the unfinished business. Are you guys familiar with the concept of the 3 types of ghosts that develop upon death? Yeah. Hungry, sleepy, no. There's also the 7 dwarves. Is that related to this? Yeah, so it's the hungry, Jeffrey always says horny, but I mean, I think that's probably not the right word to use here, and wandering. I think he just says it because he thinks it's funny.
What's the traditional term?
I don't know. Romantic.
Well, it's like when you learn that.
I know, but it's because Jeffrey uses it.
These are Po, or these are just like adjacent?
These are
Um,
the unresolved code.
Well, I don't know what else to put here for right now, but it's not always horny. It's not always like sexual attraction there. So these are the types of Gui that can develop upon death. The hungry ghost is the concept of you have unfinished business. So this is like when you've developed some fascination in your life that you felt like you needed to meet and you never met it. So the idea of like, you really wanted to do something and you couldn't do it, and you felt very strongly about it. And so, it was such a big feature, such an important feature of your life that, it's created this like pull to the physical world, and it's like not allowing you to pass on. So that's the idea of the hungry ghost. Like you really, this is any aspect of your life. It can be for anything. But this is desires. This is basically the Buddhist concept would be desires. So that's how you could summarize that. So desire to still be in the physical world, you're not able to pass on. The horny ghost, why don't we call this the partnership ghost or something, like partner or something, because the idea is it's another person that's holding you here.
Emotional attachment.
Yeah, it's the emotional attachment or something. So the idea is that...
Call a spade a spade.
So this means that you've died, and your husband, your wife, your mom, your dad, your best friend, somebody can't let you go, and it's someone that you have a strong attachment to. Now it can be family, or it can be a romantic partner. It can be a spouse or something. Normally the spouse becomes kind of this, there's this idea that the flesh kind of becomes entwined when you have sex with someone. So it's creating kind of this union of the flesh, and that mingles the DNA or mingles the Jing, and then you have a spiritual attachment to the person. So they are able to manipulate you or hold you here or whatever if you die. And so with your family that already exists because you already have this kind of like shared Jing. So that's the concept with a horny ghost. That's why I say it's not always horny, because a lot of times it's a grieving parent or child. So anyway, we'll think about that. But that means someone else, another person. And the wandering ghost means that you've died violently. Or you've died traditionally in Chinese culture when you die away from home. Because in Chinese culture, it's very important to be buried. Traditional culture, it's very important to be buried in your ancestral graveyard, like with the rest of the family and everything. So the idea is you've died far away from home, or you've died really violently, or the traditional execution method of beheading someone is because it makes you a ghost. So you become earthbound. Because when you cut off the head, it's like the spirit can't do the thing where it comes up and exits, the Hun can't exit through the fontanelle. You don't get that DMT blast that opens up the crown chakra, and suddenly they're able to access the higher planes, and the spirit is able to go right there. You cut off the head, and the spirit's just flopping. So that's why that's a punishment, you know.
So I listened to a class with Dean Lewis,
Mm-hmm.
and she mentioned, or she just made a correlation, or that because nowadays we actually give people drugs when they're dying to help
Mm-hmm.
them just be calm and not be in pain or just be settled.
Yeah.
That it affects their ethereal soul.
Yep.
And maybe that's a cause of more problems that we have now, like autism or other things, you know. When
Like
people
when
come
they,
back,
oh,
you know, in a different body.
maybe. I mean, I don't know. I
Alluded to that.
would imagine. I mean, I don't know that you can. I don't know that it would taint the quality of the Hun in the next lifetime. I think that would be really hard to do, because I think most of those drugs are just, they're affecting the physical body. I don't think they're really poisoning the spirit. I don't think they're really poisoning the spirit, but I think that they are likely to lead to more issues with passing on.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, the Hun stays in the body, resonates with the body for 3 days before it leaves. And the Po resonates with the body until the body decays. So, but with the Hun, that's traditionally why you have a wake. You have like the Jews kind of, you know, or also the Romani, all these different cultures where they sit Shiva, and, you know, they are, they're staying with the body and keeping the body in a, you know, pretty protected environment for 3 days before they do anything with it. And that's because it takes those 3 days for the spirit to properly leave. Yeah, so the passing on process is kind of important. And so during that time, if the person is, let's say, embalmed, you know, the next day or something, could theoretically really interfere with the passing on process. Yeah, did you have a question?
What about like cremation? Would that also?
With cremation, I think probably it's not too problematic. I think I would imagine you'd want to wait 3 days still. Yeah. I think that in a really healthy situation, it doesn't take a full 3 days. And often I think people depart. You even have stories of people that are, you know, depart their body, you know, willingly, right? So it's like people that go into meditative states and depart their body willingly. And so that's if someone's, you know, and when you're meditating, by the way, if you're doing dissociative meditation, the idea is that you're strengthening the Hun. You're solidifying the Hun. Do you guys know this concept of like crystallizing the Hun? Mm-hmm. So there's this idea that like when you dream, the Hun just leaves the body and wanders, right? But most people don't have a strong grasp on that or can't control it too well. But the idea of being able to connect with your Hun, join the Hun kind of with the astral body, use the astral body to like crystallize this like kind of ship around the Hun, and then you can ride the Hun into different dimensions.
Oh, that's like Tibetan dream yoga.
Yeah, so this is like this is one of the Taoist things, one of the traditional Taoist concepts that they would do. And so they would do these meditations where they were in their waking state using their own chi to facilitate the movement into these different places, and then they can depart the body at will. And then that's also approaching some of the concepts of immortality. Like one of the levels of immortality is that you're Yeah, the first level of immortality in Taoism is that you live a really long time. So you're not really immortal, but you live really long, like say 200 or 300 years. Okay, so you're a type of immortal. And then second level means that you retain your consciousness between lifetimes. So you're able to leave the body and you maintain your conscious state. You remember everything, you carry that with you, and then you come back and you can keep it with you. So this is kind of like that idea of like your Hun normally leaves and the consciousness dies with the body. The memories die with the body. But if you can join those things together and create this crystallization, then it can pass together and come back together. So that's the second level of immortality. And then the third level of immortality, they say, is you're able to dematerialize and move through the dimensions and do everything else. So you have full control over the physical body in the moment, and you can essentially polarize into the spiritual and back into the physical. But yeah, this stuff starts to get all the Hun is all about that stuff. Yeah. Yeah. But, okay, I don't know if, but the idea with the Po is the Po are going to be associated with hungry ghosts. So often they'll say you want to resolve the Po, you want to, as best as you can, you want to really try to resolve the Po over the course of your lifetime. And, don't feed into the desires in a pathological way and all this stuff, and then you can pass on properly. And so, yeah. And again, maybe herbs like duho and things like that are helpful for this. There's a lot of herbs that they say get rid of worms and get rid of ghosts and expel demons and that sort of thing, and often they're talking about the Po for that. Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask about, like when you have, like sometimes when there's energetic parasites or physical parasites, they're latching on to bad habits that we have, or like wounds that are unhealed, or like addictive tendencies.
Yeah.
Would that be Po? So like clinically, if somebody is having some sort of, I can't quite find the words,
Possession?
yeah, like a possession type of thing, would you treat it through the lung channel? Like how would you?
Well, it depends on how it's manifesting. Yeah. You can have a possession from a Hun Gui or a Po Gui. Yeah. So possession through a Hun Gui is going to be more severe and much less common. Yeah. And that's going to mean you have some kind of Gui that has an agenda and a consciousness and is doing more like, it's kind of like they're, an involuntary walk-in or something. Yeah. So that's like the Hun Gui concept. And the Hun Gui is more likely to be called a demon. So that's when they start talking about like a possession by like this, they'll call it like a Mo, like a demon.
The Po Gui is pretty common.
With the Po, it's much more common, and you can say, this is why like people that are on a spiritual path often don't eat meat, right? Because animals have all these Po, and then you eat the animal and you absorb all these Po, and it's essentially weighing down the spirit. Yeah. It's like anchoring the spirit. It's even like you can see, it's like down at this place, the base of the spine, it's forming this kind of anchor, and it's very heavy for the spirit, and it can interfere with a lot of concepts of trying to resolve your karma and trying to be benevolent and go into these higher spiritual states. But anytime you eat an animal, you are absorbing the Po. Plants, I think if they have Po at all, it would be very minimal and very little impact on the body. But that would be to a certain degree type of possession, because you're inviting that kind of spirit into the body. There are concepts of like having Po Gui which like resonate just kind of in a space or something like that. So it's like you could conceptually kind of have like Po Gui in a certain like geographical region or in a certain house or something like this. And normally what it is it's just pure emotional energy. It's not like there's any kind of like directive consciousness behind it. It's a pure resonance of like an emotional state or pure resonance of a desire state or something like that. So it's like it's almost like the idea of like, in astrology where they have the south node is like the headless dragon. So it's like there's no head, all it is the belly. All it is the pure desire. So that's like the idea of a Po Gui. And if you're in a house that's got maybe a strong resonance of some particular Po Gui, suddenly you might find that you're resonating with that thing and you're developing all these qualities. So I think of that as being kind of more like the way you would relate to that.
And how do you address that through these systems that we have?
Well, I guess it depends on what it's resonating in or what the resonance is. It's interesting the way they talk about it. In some ways they talk about it really tangibly, like they even have like this idea that like as the Po sinks down, like carnelian. Have you guys heard Jeffrey talk about carnelian and how the lore around carnelian. He says that carnelian comes from when horses die. He said their Po sinks down into the earth, and the Po starts to go into the stones, and it motivates the stones to move and transform. And he says it's just pure motive energy, and so it'll motivate the stones to kind of do this transformation, and it creates. So the word for carnelian in Chinese has something to do with horse, and he said that's why. So the idea is these Po are almost like this kind of like pure motive energy in the world, and you put them on something, and it's even if you put it on the table, suddenly the table has this like resonance toward like it's going to be like a very hungry table or something or whatever, and but it's very physical. So I would say that I don't know. I mean, choose your purification method. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not a. Oh yeah.
Has talked about like the they did that we fumigate worms and stuff, so like not just mugwort, but also like we have like the sandalwood, like in our herbal things, we have the fragrant, right, like you'd smudge something, right, like you'd like that kind of idea, so herbs like that.
I would say I would be thinking, I mean, if practically speaking, if someone called me and said I need you to exercise a pogway, I would be thinking about substances I would be thinking about sulfur.
It's more common than you would like. I know this sounds crazy, but it's very real.
Maybe like I don't think anyone thinks that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I would be thinking about sulfur-based substances.
He almost did on the treatment plan.
I would be thinking about any substances where they say it expels worms traditionally in the Materia Medica. Fundamentally, these are a yin resonant spirit, so they're going to be things that manifest only more during the yin times. They're going to have kind of this like, this is like the traditional poltergeist or something like that, or often. Jeffrey's also talked about differentiating Pogway from Hungway in that Hungway, because they have a resonance with the liver, are going to have more of a resonance with time. And Pogway, because they have a resonance with the lungs, have more of a resonance with space. So he'll say that Hungway are not spatially bound, but they're temporally bound. So a Hungway is going to be like if someone develops like a pathological state of the Hun, and the Hun fragments and it becomes a Hungway, let's say something like that, then it's going to be, even if the person dies and lives a long, full life, it's going to be a little kid version of themselves. And it's not temporally bound, and it can move and wander and everything else. It can follow you around, in other words. You lived in Santa Fe and this ghost haunted you, and now you live here and it's haunting you. So that's a Hun. So with the Po, it's temporally bound, and that's classic. So the Po are classically like, this is like the idea of a poltergeist, because poltergeist haunts a house. Or it's like the idea of like a resonant spirit that lives on a hill. It's like, don't go into that hill. That hill has a bad spirit or whatever. So it's like that's like more Po resonance normally, assuming it's coming from, this kind of thing. So you can use that to your advantage, that they're spatially bound and you can just leave, or you can do things. So yeah, I would say I would normally think about doing kind of the fumigation method maybe. I would say you probably want to do something that's actually interactive with the physical substance of whatever that spirit is resonant in, and I would say sulfur-based compounds are a safe way to go. That's the traditional across cultures, the way that they expel demons almost always is with sulfur-based compounds.
I have a great question.
Yeah.
I've understood it that like there's certain ghosts that want certain things. So like the Po, maybe one loves drinking, and so if you start into drinking, that Po can like enter in and be more attracted to you. And kind of like, is that a Po? Am I kind of?
So I had this question for Jeffrey actually one time. So I asked him about like the berserkers. Do you guys know about the berserkers? They have a Chinese version of berserkers too. So the berserkers were a Nordic fighting force, and they would go into these like frenzies where they invited animal spirits into their body before they went to fight. The Taoists did the same thing, even all the way up until the Boxers' Rebellion. Lots of Taoists were doing this, where they would invite these spirits. They learned how to host spirits in their body, and you see this with a lot of traditional shamanic cultures, where they'll host a spirit in their body and suddenly they're invincible. They can't be cut. So the Taoists would do this, and they would do all these demonstrations where you could just jab them with a spear and it wouldn't go in, because they had all these like spirits that were protecting them. And I asked Jeffrey about this, and I was like, was that Po? And he said yes. So according to Jeffrey, the idea is if you're hosting spirits in that kind of shamanic sense and you're drawing them in, you're drawing in Po, and you can accumulate Po in the body. You can like load up on Po. And if you have a bunch of Po, you can become very powerful. So a lot of dark sorcery and things like that involves accumulating lots and lots of Po in your body. So
there's more than just sex.
this is one of these kind of things of like selling your soul. Like you're not going to get to heaven if you do this.
They can drive you towards
Yeah.
like, wrong actions. Or
Yeah, and it's also why a lot of these practices corrupt the person. You know, they always become evil. Yeah.
In the Dracula book, the guy in the asylum, he's like, first he tends all his flies, and then he like feeds them to the spiders, and he eats all the spiders. It has a gross progression with like similar thing, like eating.
Yeah, so like the vampire, like the idea of a vampire would very much be like this. Yeah.
So then there's more than just 7 types of Po then.
No, it's not 7 types of Po. I mean, they will talk about the 7 types of Po, but it's the idea that you have normally 7 Po in your body at a given time, and when you're born, usually you host 7 Po.
But it's like a whole realm. It's like a whole ass realm.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Guys,
Okay.
where we start.
Well, I'm pretty much done. I don't know, unless we want to keep talking about more things about this stuff. I don't have
I
any.
can
Yeah.
share one thing
Yeah,
that Mindy
yeah.
had us do in clinic one time. I think it was 3 hots on the spirit point of the lung
Okay.
to bring to summon the Po back.
Is that bladder 52?
I resisted saying the number because I
Yeah.
don't remember.
Okay. But the outer shoe point of the
lung,
lung, yeah.
outer shoe point of the lung, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was cool.
Cool.
To summon the Po back in.
Okay.
Bye.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. Yeah. So, I mean, we could, I think, do a lot of digging into looking at exorcism techniques and everything else like that, but it would probably get a little bit long and tedious to. 42. It might get a little long and tedious to look at that. But that stuff's interesting, and I think that there's probably a lot of room for like theoretical expansion and like practical methods. I think a lot of people are interested in that. I mean, if you've ever lived in a haunted house or anything, it's like it can be hard to get rid of that stuff. So, yeah.
So it's kind of like a spiritual EPF in a way.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. If you look at the house as being like part of your domain, it's like an extended aspect of like the mind, extended aspect of the Wei Qi or whatever. Yeah.
I feel like the reason Jeffrey's so horny, because he maps these onto worms too, and he's like the hungry worm or ghost or whatever is like, it's like the diseases where you eat, but you become emaciated.
Yeah.
The horny one is like STDs, and the wandering was like, you're traveling, you get digestive sickness. And
Okay.
Like, that's the kind of.
He was saying that was corruptions in the Hun?
No, he was talking about like, like the Gwei and worms are like related. Like
Yeah.
he's broken it down. He's done the
The Gu and Gwei, yeah.
The 3, you know what I mean? So I feel like that's the translation that I've heard in that context. So like it made sense with the thing he was teaching.
Yeah.
So anyway, just
Yeah.
to say why he might love that terminology.
Yeah.
But even if you think of it as just desire, so it could be desire to be with a family member that you're not, but like it's a horniness, it's a longing, it's like a desire to touch the flesh, to hold, to caress,
Yeah, it's like you physically won't let them go. It's not even that, and it might not even be that you have a desire. I mean, yeah, it is fundamentally you want them to be here, But yeah, but the big difference is with the hungry ghost, you are the one that's holding yourself. The horny ghost, someone else is holding you here. So you've created that connection, and you need to do a cord cutting ceremony or something. Yeah.
Don't let anyone in.
Cut 'em dead.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Interesting discussion. Thanks for coming.